The Patrick Riggins Show. Call in now, 865-243-TALK. That's 243-8255. And now your host, Patrick Riggins.
Yes, one of us is going down, and it isn't me. It is this fanatical reliance on government solutions to everything in our country. Welcome to another week of the Patrick Riggins Show here on the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network, the radio station on which you hear this bastion of logical and reasoned thinking is 100.3 WNOX, the flagship station of the Patrick Riggins Show. The station pumping out 100,000 watts of power and blasting my voice loud and clear over parts of 5 of these great southeastern United States. Even with all that power, though, we cannot alter physics. It's just a simple fact that some people are not going to be able to receive our broadcast via the radio waves. If that is the case where you live, then I don't know how you're listening to me. But you still don't have to miss one exciting moment of the show.
You can catch them on the internet.
There we go. Glad you brought that up, Tori.
Hopefully it's working this week.
Yes, all you need to do is bring up your web browser and type in www.wnoxfm.com, and there you can watch and listen to this show being simulcast live via the internet. That web address again is wnoxfm.com, and hopefully it is running this week. I was notified last week it was not. Well, it was, but you couldn't hear anything. So you could see us, but no hearing. That may be a good thing. It may be a bad thing, depending on how you look at it.
Read lips.
So, and speaking of being alive and in person, we have in our studio, you've heard him right here, our show producer, Tori. Are you enjoying the cooler weather?
Yeah.
I am not. I was hoping we could avoid all this and just stay with the warm weather we had last week.
Yes, I know. Me too.
Unfortunately not. But, hey, that's life. What are you going to do?
That's right, PR.
PR. That's good PR. All right. Well, thank you for everyone for taking the time to tune in this week, both our new listeners and our loyal veteran ones. For you new people, you're listening to the benchmark show for libertarian thinking, the bedrock of the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network. It's none other than the show named after that great American citizen, Patrick Riggins, the Patrick Riggins Show. Here we are fighting for a return to the principles that made America great. No, not conservative principles and not progressive principles, but libertarian principles, American principles. Those are what made this country great. Freedom and liberty. You cannot have those with a government that insists on trying to run everyone's life. And I'm not talking about just the federal government, but government at all levels. Nosiness isn't confined to just Washington, D.C. No, it has corrupted government all the way down to your local county and city representatives. Notice I don't refer to them as leaders, as most people do. These people aren't leaders. Leaders are people in business, people in industry, people working to better mankind. People in government are not supposed to be the leaders. They're supposed to be the followers. They are our employees. We are the leaders. We are the ones that should be telling them what to do and when to do it. We elect them. If I can hire and fire you, then I'm your boss. I'm over you. And thus I'm the leader, not you working in government. This is part of the problem in America today. We have everything backwards. We name things after people in government. But just look at all the pork projects all around this country. Roads and bridges, buildings, parks. 9 times out of 10, they're named for a politician. The person who stole the money from the taxpayers to spend it on this monument, this park or bridge or whatever it is. And to reward this thievery, we name it after this person. They didn't pay for it. All they did was take the money from the taxpayers of this country and spend it. That's an activity, well, personally, I don't particularly think calls for being rewarded. Now, if a private individual or individuals get together and purchase the land or the building or whatever and set it aside for public use, then sure, they can name it whatever they want and have a foundation to care for it. They don't need to acquire it and then donate it to the government. That just puts the burden on upkeep on us, the taxpayers. If enough people want it, then funding a foundation to pay for its care and upkeep should not be any problem at all. If you want to look at government this way, it's like a bush in your yard that you haven't been paying attention to. You've been busy taking the kids to baseball practice or going to visit friends or watching television. All the while, this bush has continued growing and growing until one day you look out in your yard and this thing's just run amok.
Is this like George Bush?
It could be.
Okay, go ahead.
You could use that.
Sorry.
But it pertains to any government. But this thing is now in your front yard. It's overgrown its space. It is out of all proportion. It's trying to take over the whole yard. It's ugly and it needs pruning.
It is a George Bush.
Yeah. Unfortunately, unlike this bush of ours, government won't sit back and let you prune it. It is going to fight back. Just witness all the president and government in general is doing to make these sequester cuts as hard on everybody as they can. This is what our founders warned us about. They realized the citizens needed to keep government under control. They knew government needed to be constantly monitored or it would start overgrowing its bounds. It's inevitable. This is the natural progression of government unless it's checked by the people. Look at any organization that started. It constantly and consistently outgrows its bounds. Now, the founders knew this. The government needs to be pruned back. Unfortunately, like that wild bush, as Tori likes to say, or tree or whatever it is that has outgrown your yard, when we prune it back, it's going to look ugly and bare. But it will eventually fill back out and the cycle will repeat. It will tend to outgrow its boundaries again and have to be pruned yet again. The easier way to do it next time is to prune a little every year and keep it in its place. That way you don't have to radically cut huge pieces out of it to get it back to where it should be. All right, we're up on the first break on the Patrick Riggins Show. This hour, if you're a conservative and you're a Republican, well, you want to be sure and tune in.
Wah, wah.
Yeah, you will not. You may like Patrick after this next segment, or you may not.
Are you going to tickle their fancy?
That would be, I hope so.
I
hope they're not screaming. Anyway, we'll come back with that and more on the Patrick Riggins Show.
Fighting for freedom, liberty, and the restoration of the Constitution. The Patrick Riggins Show. Call in now at 865-243-8255. That's 243-TALK. And now your host, Patrick Riggins.
Welcome back to the Patrick Riggins Show. Here, irritating both sides, the conservatives and the liberals. If you're a conservative or even a moderate Republican, or maybe even just a Republican with no modifier, and more importantly a conservative, you really need to listen to this segment. What I'm going to talk about is how major conservative voices define freedom in this country, what they think freedom actually is. Now, I talk about this subject frequently because, as you hear at the beginning of this show, here we are fighting for freedom, liberty, and the restoration of the Constitution. But notice the order of those words: freedom, then liberty, which are really one and the same, and then the Constitution. The individual's freedom and liberty comes first. In this country, they're supposed to be secured by the Constitution, which states, well, I'm paraphrasing, the individual retains all the freedom. The states are granted some permissions to do things, and then the federal government is granted even fewer permissions. Now, why this is so threatening to people, I'll never understand. But scared of it, they are. Even conservatives, people who espouse that they stand for freedom and liberty. Of course, what they really mean is freedom and liberty as long as you're living the way they think you should. Now, same story for liberals. As long as you're living according to the way they think you should, you're okay. But I always take more offense at conservatives, though, because they are the ones always preaching freedom, yet they don't embrace it. I've mentioned this many times, but at least at least the liberals let you know they are wanting to take away your freedom. The conservatives lie about it, and right to your face to boot. But getting on with my point on this segment, I know and by we I mean libertarians, I know we are starting to worry the conservatives because this week, and I don't normally do this, but I'll mention another radio show host, even this week Rush Limbaugh addressed the issue and made known his stance on the matter. Now, being a free show, I don't want to sit here and tell you Rush said this and Rush said that, because there are some in this audience who would not believe it. They'd say, oh, Rush wouldn't have stated that. Patrick's just exaggerating. So, in the spirit of fairness, we broke down what he is saying so you can hear it for yourself. And he's the self-proclaimed spokesman of conservatives in this country. These people are really starting to feel the heat of the libertarians fighting to roll back all this government intervention, and with it, government control and direction of supposedly free American citizens. These conservatives don't like libertarianism any more than the liberals do, because it removes government from people's lives. As I've said numerous times on this show, both sides want to maintain governmental control of the people of this country. They both want to tell you how you should be living and with whom you should be living. They want to tell you what you can and can't do with your private property. They want to control as much of your life as possible, all because they know how you should live better than you do. Or that's their thinking on the matter anyway. The whole marriage issue has become prominent in this country since the Supreme Court started considering the legality of the Defense of Marriage Act, which incidentally I talked about on this very show just last week. If you want to hear some irrefutable and logical analysis on that subject, feel free after this show to head over to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Patrick Riggin Show, and there you can get that show and all the other archives in which you'll hear really why this show is the pinnacle of the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network. But getting back to the subject of freedom, Rush Limbaugh used the gay marriage subject to address freedom as he sees it from a conservative standpoint. Now, here is his take on it, and this is from his show this week.
Freedom is being misapplied or maybe incorrectly defined. Freedom does not mean hedonism. Freedom does not mean the sybaritic pursuit. Just do what you want.
Okay, so freedom doesn't mean do what you want. Then what does freedom mean? Well, it means doing what he thinks you should be doing, living how he thinks you should be living, thinking how he thinks you should be thinking. What he and other conservatives in this country are trying to do is define libertarian freedom as some amoral, going to hell in a handbasket, scary Sodom and Gomorrah society. If you believe in freedom to do what you want, then God is going to condemn this country and all of its inhabitants to Hades for eternity. Now, in this next clip, Rush points out that a broad definition of freedom is wrong and goes on to correctly link it to libertarians, but incorrectly to, as he puts it, quote, radical leftists.
Freedom is taking on a whole new meaning, incorrectly and dangerously so. But this very broad definition of freedom that is used to, for example, justify gay marriage is being advanced not just by radical leftists, but by libertarians as well.
So, radical leftists and libertarians are on the same page when it comes to freedom. Now, reasonable and intelligent people know how crazy this statement is. But the reason he is trying to link these two groups together, libertarians and radical leftists, is because he wants his audience immediately to discount anything a libertarian has to say. Because it's nothing more than exactly what a radical leftist would say. And his audience hates radical leftists. These conservatives are scared to death of any type of libertarian thinking taking place in the Republican Party or within the conservative movement. The way they see it, they want to be in charge. That's all. Kick out the liberals and put conservatives in charge. They want the same government intervention. They just want to be in charge of it. That's really the only difference. Now, in this next clip, Rush actually mentions Ron Paul in an effort to lend some credence to what he's saying.
Ron Paul said something, and I've mentioned this before, his so-called farewell address to Congress when he left. He said he couldn't believe how difficult it was, or is, to sell freedom to people.
Yes, Mr. Limbaugh, why is it so difficult to sell freedom to you and all the other conservatives in this country? You would think the conservative movement would be the first ones to jump onto the bandwagon, but they aren't. Let's hear what Dr. Paul has to say on this subject of gay marriage, and I've played this numerous times. I think we played it last week.
I think the government should just be out of it. I think it should be done by the church or private contract, and we shouldn't have this argument. Who's married and who isn't married? I have my standards, but I shouldn't have to impose my standards on others. Others have standards, and they have no right to impose their marriage standards on me, and I just don't like it. But if we want to have something to say about marriage, it should be at the state level and not at the federal government. Just get the government out of it. It's one area where it's totally unnecessary, and they've caused more trouble than necessary.
Well, apparently Mr. Limbaugh did not bother to listen to Dr. Paul make that statement, because Rush would profoundly disagree with it. I know that because of the statements we have just been playing for you. Here's more from Rush.
Now, he meant freedom from government, self-reliance, responsibility, taking control of your own life and making the most of it.
Well, he gets that correct. Dr. Paul means freedom from government. That's what he constantly talked about and still does. So is Mr. Limbaugh so confused about freedom that he doesn't realize he is just arguing against what Dr. Paul preaches? That he was just lumping together libertarians, of whom Dr. Paul is one of the biggest, with far-left radicals. Are all conservatives this confused? I don't think so. Personally, I think conservatives, well, they're just, and I apologize for saying this, but they're just not thinking. They have not sat down and completely thought out the positions for which they stand. If they did, they would realize that most of them are really libertarians. If they really thought about how the ways in which they want government telling people what to do, they would realize the hypocrisy of their positions. Now, in this next clip, Rush makes clear how he feels about this individual freedom.
Freedom without virtue isn't freedom. It will eventually destroy a society. Freedom without morality. Freedom without proper constraints and restraints. Freedom without an accompanying sense of responsibility. Freedom without a spine or a spinal cord morality. We're not talking freedom.
Freedom without proper constraints and restraints is not freedom. Well, who says what those constraints and restraints are? This is what I mean when I say these people have not completely thought through these issues. They are doing exactly what they accuse liberals of doing. Acting without thinking, taking stands on issues without question. Unfortunately, I can't say the same for Mr. Limbaugh. He has thought out his positions, and he has decided that we all need to live the way he thinks we should.
To young people today, that's exactly what freedom is. Freedom is hedonism. Freedom is your sybarite pursuits. You do whatever you want, and as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else, there's nothing wrong with it. And it's the as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else, that's where the trouble begins.
It's the as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else, that's where the trouble begins. So if I'm living my own life, if I'm not infringing on someone else's natural human rights all of us are born with as humans, as long as I'm not infringing on someone else's natural human rights and they aren't infringing on mine, that's not enough. That's not good enough for these people who want to control how other people live. To live in that fashion, taking care of myself in a way that is acceptable to me, as long as it doesn't bother anyone else, that's not acceptable to these people. If you are a conservative in this radio audience, are you comfortable living that way? Do you agree with what this leader of your movement is stating? We are up on the bottom of the hour break here at the Patrick Riggins Show already. When we come back, we'll have more of this with Rush. We'll also have some clips from Coulter, who ventures down the exact same road. And we'll get an update on Magpul out there in Colorado, all crammed into the last half of this show when we come back.
Fighting for freedom, liberty, and the restoration of the Constitution. The Patrick Riggins Show. Call in now at 865-243-8255. That's 243-TALK. And now your host, Patrick Riggins.
Welcome back to the second half hour of the Patrick Riggins Show.
It makes me feel like a disco dance.
Yes. Demonstrating. We can play slow music on here as well. Well, I don't guess that's really that slow, but
That's
slower.
Slow disco.
Slow disco. So I guess you'd just move slowly.
You were the disco king back in the day, weren't you, Patrick?
Yeah.
White tux.
I don't think I could get into a disco back then. They would probably stop me at the door.
Wore the disco fever shirt.
Yeah.
Tucked into non-faded Jordache jeans with the little design on the back pocket.
Yeah, that's what, what's her name advertised?
Brooke Shields.
Yeah, that's her. Yeah, I knew it was somebody. I knew it was one of my old girlfriends.
Now you're my age, so if you were doing anything back in disco, you were tugging on your mom's shirt tail.
They were stopping you at the door and you're a midget.
Say, Mom, turn down the disco.
Yeah. My mother was not listening to disco.
Well, mine was.
Really? Yes. My mom was probably listening to Frank Sinatra.
Saturday Night Fever, 8-track, in the Lincoln Continental every time we went somewhere.
In the Lincoln Continental.
8-track.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll get back to what we're doing here. Since everybody's saying, go on with it. Let's go. Shut up. Yeah, we'll get back in. I want to continue what we were talking about this last segment, which is kind of a conservative outreach. I want the conservatives in this audience to think about what your people who are the leaders of the conservative movement are saying, and do you agree with it? In this next clip I have here, and we're still on the Rush stuff, we're going to hear how marriage is almost as old as the earth itself.
Because is there great harm to a society when an age old, I mean as old as humanity itself, custom is corrupted? Any custom, any tradition that has demonstrated its usefulness, its primacy, over hundreds of thousands of years, is a freedom that would corrupt that actually good? Is it virtuous? It isn't.
So, to his thinking, marriage is why the human race is successful. Marriage is why this country is successful. Not freedom, not liberty. It's marriage. Something that has been around for, well, as Rush puts it, hundreds of thousands of years. Never mind the oldest known writing which actually records something other than numerals. That dates back to about 3,300 BC. So, and I'm sure it probably doesn't mention marriage at all. But Rush apparently has some knowledge, some type of confirmation that marriage has existed for hundreds of thousands of years, and governments from that early beginning, hundreds of thousands of years ago, organizational bodies always decreed how marriage was to be handled and had their noses in the private lives of their citizens or the people who live together in that area. He also equates having freedom to do what you want as corrupting marriage, corrupting the traditional thoughts of marriage, that of a man and a woman, when it doesn't. Freedom has nothing to do with marriage. Marriage is not a natural human right, whether you're married or not, and to whom you're to be married. Freedom has nothing to do with that. Just because you are born a human doesn't mean you are bestowed with marriage. But because you are born a human, it does mean you are born with freedom. Certain inalienable rights, as our founders put it. But here is a prominent conservative commentator arguing the downfall of society is precipitated on the fact that if you have unbound freedom, society is going to fall apart. All because you aren't going to live how he thinks you should. So I ask all you conservatives in this audience again, are you comfortable with one of your leaders, some would say the leader of your movement, speaking in this way, making these types of statements? How different is this attitude from a Democrat's, from a liberal's? Are they not on the same road to telling people what to do? Of course they are. The conservatives just feel like they are correct, and the liberals feel the same. When the truth of the matter is, neither of them have any business sticking their nose into other people's lives. So I ask again, are you conservatives comfortable with this line of thinking? This type of, as long as you're acting as we think you should, you're okay. Is this the way you want to live your life? Do you want people imposing their morality, their ideas of living on your life? Even more so, legislating their morality and ideas into law and then penalizing you for not living as they think you should. Is this okay with you? If not, you need to start looking into the Libertarian Party, or the very least, pulling your Republican Party out of the hands of those who think this way. Now, this thinking isn't limited to just Rush. Ann Coulter appeared on another conservative commentator show, Dennis Prager's, and we've got those clips. In this clip, both of them are dumbfounded that Rand Paul won the straw vote at last week's Conservative Political Action Conference. Now, this recording isn't so great. It was sent to me by a loyal listener of the show, so I hope you can hear it okay, but here's the first clip.
Well, Rand Paul won the vote by 2 points over Marco Rubio.
How did that happen, you're wondering?
Now, how did that happen? Well, listen up, Dennis and Ann, and I'll tell you, Marco Rubio is a big government guy. That's how. I have covered, or more accurately, uncovered and exposed his big government solutions for us all. Now, if you want to hear them, again, you can just pop over to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Patrick Riggins Show, and I've covered Mr. Rubio's hypocrisy a few weeks ago, but I also warned you about him all the way back last summer. Now, here's another clip from that interview.
Ron Paul used to win every year because these libertarian college kids, unlike libertarian adults like Richard Epstein and Gary Lawson, for example, they are just consumed by groupthink. They're really like liberals this way.
So, all these libertarian college kids are nothing but a bunch of idiots without an original thought in any of their heads. Sounds a lot like what Rush had to say as well.
Young people have this almost romantic attachment to civil rights, civil liberties, emancipating people from oppression, from liberty.
So the libertarians are a bunch of stupid young people who don't know any better. They don't realize that all these adults, all these older, more mature, or more intelligent people, these people know everything, and if you don't agree with them, well, then you're just immature or too stupid to realize how much better your life would be if you would live how these supposedly smart and worldly people wanted you to live. And Ann Coulter is berating these college libertarians for suffering from groupthink. How much more groupthink do you want among these conservative leaders? They accuse people of doing exactly what they do, and they wonder why they can't recapture the voters of this country. They sit and wonder why their base stays home. It's because the base doesn't agree with you people. I know what you conservatives in this audience are thinking. Oh, Patrick, Ann Coulter, Rush Limbaugh, along with all these other conservative leaders, they don't really look down on libertarians. Well, here's another clip from Ann on that same show.
This is what these many of the young libertarians are like, but don't worry, they're going to turn 16 and grow out of it.
So they're going to turn 16 and grow out of it. So if you think you should have the freedom to do what you want, as long as you aren't infringing on someone else's rights, you'll grow out of it. Yes, exactly, Tori. You're acting like a child and you need to grow up. Idiots. You need to realize there are people in this world smarter than you and more capable of running your life than you are. That's what she's saying. I'll ask again, are you conservatives comfortable with hearing your leaders speak this way? Do you agree with these positions? That freedom and liberty is a childlike fantasy. Here's Dennis Prager, that's the show Ann's on. This is what he said during that same interview.
They have far more left-wing positions than conservative positions.
Just as I noted before during the clips I was playing of Rush Limbaugh, these people see no difference between libertarians and the far left in this country. Let's listen to that clip again that I played earlier from Rush.
Freedom is taking on a whole new meaning, incorrectly and dangerously so. But this very broad definition of freedom that is used to, for example, justify gay marriage is being advanced not just by radical leftists, but by libertarians as well.
As you can see, there's a mad dash to associate anything libertarian with the far left in order to try and keep the conservative base from starting to look at the libertarians as people they have more in common with than their conservative leaders. And that's true, they do. The average conservative does have more in common with libertarians than they do with the Republican establishment, the Republican leaders, and yes, even the conservative leaders. All these people want to run your life. They think they all know better than you how you should be living. We're up on the last break of the Patrick Riggins Show. When we come back, we'll try to finish this up here. We got a couple more clips from Coulter, and we'll cram Magpul moving out of Colorado in there as well. When we come back, be sure and join us. Don't miss a bit of this show this week.
Fighting for freedom, liberty, and the restoration of the Constitution. The Patrick Riggins Show. Call in now at 865-243-8255. That's 243-TALK. And now your host, Patrick Riggins.
All right. Back here on the Patrick Riggins Show. This show will definitely be one of the gold ones.
It's a keeper.
Yes, it's a keeper.
It's a keeper.
Although there's probably some people screaming at their radios and at Patrick right now, but hey, that's a good thing. I'm making you think. Anyway, we're going to jump right back into this. We're playing some quotes from Coulter there and what she thinks of libertarians, and she's on Dennis Prager's show. This is another clip of what she had to say on there.
I hate groupthink, and the libertarians have it every bit as much as the college liberals I speak to. I give a lot of college speeches, and it was the same thing where, you all have to cheer together, and you all have to boo the same stuff. And, I guess when you're young and insecure, feeling like you're part of a group is important to you.
Yeah, they were going to break. Tori started looking around when he heard music. So Ann hates that group think, but she does make sure she equates libertarians with liberals, just like Rush Limbaugh does, just like Dennis Prager does, just like she just did. But she hates group think. She also gets that dig in right at the end of the clip, making the association that being libertarian and thinking like other libertarians, well, you just do that because you're young and immature and feeling part of a group is important to you. Can you hear the desperation from these conservative leaders? Can you hear how they are all saying almost the exact same thing? Now, I've said this over and over on this show. Listen to what these people say with an ear towards freedom and liberty. If you do that, you will start hearing how they are all hypocrites. Both sides, Republicans, Democrats, liberals, conservatives, they all want to be in charge. They all want to be telling you how to live. They all have this arrogance, this contempt for true freedom, this smugness that only they know the truth, that only they are the ones who can lead you to a life of happiness and fulfillment. If only you will listen to them, if only you will do what they say, if only you will live how they say you should live, only then will you be happy and content. Well, can I not just decide that for myself? No way. Only the truly enlightened can know the way for you to live, the path upon which you should walk. If you question it, if you try to make decisions on your own, then you're acting just childish and immature. Well, we are going to cut out of that real quick. I had a little bit more on it, but I want to get to this before the end of the show, mainly because we talked about it on one of my other shows. I wanted to update you quickly on a story we did. It was a couple of weeks ago. We told you about how Magpul, a company in Colorado that is one of the country's largest producers of gun magazines and other firearm accessories. Now, there in Colorado, when I did the story, Colorado was threatening to pass restrictions on magazine sizes, and Magpul announced that they would be moving the company out of state should that happen. Well, if you've read the news, you know what happened. Colorado passed the measures, and what happened? Now Magpul is moving. Here's a clip from my show real quick. Now, supporters of the proposals in Colorado say Magpul is bluffing and that a move would prove too costly. One of them, which is Bill Hoover, whose grandson AJ was among the 12 killed in the theater shooting there. He said, I don't think Magpul is about to pull out. It's going to cost them a bundle of money. Oh yeah, here we go with Mr. Hoover, who is an expert because his grandson was killed in the theater shooting. Yeah, that makes you an expert. Hey, Mr. Hoover, did you read where the other states were offering to pay Magpul's moving expenses? Did you read that? No, of course you didn't. Because you see, your grandson's death is a way to push a political agenda. I'm sure your children are proud of you taking advantage of their tragedy in that way. Good move there, Mr. Hoover. You've demonstrated that you're a good state-controlled person, willing to walk in lockstep with whatever your government tells you to do. Way to use your critical thinking skills there. Now, as it turns out, Magpul wasn't bluffing. Here's the story from the Denver Post newspaper. Ammunition magazine manufacturer Magpul Industries said it plans to begin leaving Colorado almost immediately, and other firms may follow suit in the wake of a new law that limits ammunition magazine capacities. Now, Magpul Chief Operating Officer Doug Smith said, our moving efforts are underway. Within the next 30 days, we will manufacture our first magazine outside the state of Colorado. Now, the firm's departure could have a ripple effect on companies that supply parts and materials to Magpul. Lloyd Lawrence, who's an owner of Denver-based Lawrence Tool and Molding, said, we're basically going to follow Magpul and do our best to continue being a supplier of them, and it will probably be out of state. Manufacturers could continue to make large capacity magazines if they stamp them with dates and serial numbers. They've said that provision is impractical and potentially expensive. That's Mark Pasamanek from Wheat Ridge-based Carbon Arms. They're a manufacturer of parts and accessories for firearms. He said his 5-employee firm may consider moving out of state if the magazine capacity law is not overturned by future legislation or constitutional amendments. Now, personally, I'm glad this company, Magpul, and all these others have stood by their threat and are moving out of Colorado. Now, not to screw over the people working there, but to make the point to lawmakers that people aren't just going to stand aside and let you run roughshod over them, to remind you that your actions have consequences. And real quickly, along the same line, Colt is also considering doing the same thing in Connecticut. Their president and CEO said the pro-gun control climate that has taken hold in the wake of the Sandy Hook school massacre and other firearm attacks left him feeling unwelcome in the state his company called home for 175 years. And he wrote an op-ed in the Hartford Courant this week in which he raised the prospect of leaving the state. He also said the company doesn't have, but he did say the company doesn't have any such definite plans. But if the governor follows through on his promise to ban the purchase and sale of AR-15 rifles, and that's what the centerpiece of Colt's business is, he said leaving could become an option. He also said that Colt is constantly approached by other states to relocate. Several red state governors have made no secret of the fact they covet firearms makers, an industry that by some measures contributes $1.7 billion, that's with a B, dollars annually to Connecticut's economy. So they say what the problem is they say this is just common sense legislation, what they're passing up there, and they can't figure out why anybody would oppose it. But common sense would tell you that passing legislation is not a guarantee to change anyone's behavior. And common sense would also tell you restricting law-abiding person's freedoms and liberties exactly the wrong way to go about solving this problem, which really isn't a problem from a gun perspective. Anyway, we're up on the last of the show here on the Patrick Riggins Show. We have packed as much as I could into this show. It's a very good show. Be sure and get all your conservative friends and Republican friends to go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Patrick Riggins Show, and have them listen to this. It'll be helpful for them. You can also go to facebook.com/Patrick Riggins Show and be sure and hit the like button. And you can also email us at patrickrigginshow@gmail.com or drop us a card and letter to WOXC on Kingston Pike. Woo! Join me next Sunday afternoon where once again we'll talk about freedom, liberty, and the restoration of the Constitution. This is Patrick Riggins. We will see you next Sunday afternoon at 2 p.m. Have a great week.
Join us again next week for a solid dose of truth on the Patrick Riggins Show. Every Sunday from 2 to 3 p.m. Be there.